Hi there, Rayleigh Bacon here, and welcome to the Electroculture Foundation series. This is the space where we slow down, where we begin to see, again, not just with our eyes, but with our hearts, our memory, our intuition. If you've ever felt something resilient, resonant, pulsing beneath the surface of the soil, you were right. This series explores the forgotten forces behind growth, magnetism, light, atmospheric charge, the hidden harmonics of the living earth. It's where science meets spirit, where practical meets mystical, and where reverence becomes design. Today's episode is called 3 Reasons Electroculture Works: Electrotropism, Magnetotropism, and Structured Water. I am so excited to finally do this episode because ultimately, every time I log into Facebook, and I must admit, running the largest electroculture community online is frustrating at times because I really do not actually like Facebook at all. Go figure. But the truth is, there are so many naysayers in the community, so many people who doubt the efficacy of electroculture. And many people are often saying it's pseudoscience, it has no validity, no science whatsoever behind it. And this is where this episode is going to break down 3 of the mechanisms behind electroculture. This is truly foundational, and I'm so excited that you're with me here. So let's dive right in. By now, in this series, you've seen that the Earth is wrapped in a living, dynamic electromagnetic web from the high voltage ionosphere above us to the deep rhythmic telluric currents beneath our feet. And naturally, a thoughtful mind might ask the following question: this all sounds fascinating, but isn't electroculture just another form of pseudoscience? It's a valid question, and the truth is, no, it's not. In fact, many of the foundational principles behind electroculture aren't just echoes of ancient agricultural wisdom, forgotten knowledge, and mysticism. They are grounded in rigorously documented biological science. The intersection of electricity, magnetism, and living systems is not a fringe idea. It is at the heart of disciplines like electrophysiology, geobiology, and plant neurobiology. Consider this: the soil beneath your feet, the trees in your orchard, the roots quietly weaving through your garden beds, all of them are actively engaged with subtle electromagnetic cues coursing through the earth. They don't simply grow in their environment. They are in constant conversation with it. Plants are not passive, mechanical beings reacting solely to sunlight, water, and soil. They are highly attuned electromagnetic organisms, deeply sensitive to the invisible but potent forces that shape orientation, growth, and resilience. If you've ever marveled at how plants seem to surge after a thunderstorm, or puzzled over why certain seedlings consistently lean or grow toward an unexpected direction, you're not observing randomness. You are witnessing the subtle yet powerful influence of the Earth's electrical and magnetic environment, and an underlying intelligence in nature that modern science is only beginning to fully map. Beneath every leaf, root, and stem lies a dynamic electrobiological architecture, a network through which energy, minerals, and signaling information flow. This system is guided not just by gravity and moisture gradients, but by electrical potential differences and magnetic field alignments. This is something very curious. At its heart, electroculture is fundamentally about stimulating life through electricity and magnetism. and ideally doing so with natural existing forces, rhythms of exchange that are all around us, harnessing these forces for the benefit of life, often that of plants, ecosystems, gardens, and farms. So, by stating the obvious, if roots don't just merely grow toward moisture, and that they are guided by gradients of charge, and stems and leaves do not simply stretch toward light, they align themselves with the ambient energy fields surrounding them, then how can we make sense of this in simple terms so that when there are naysayers, and there will be many, it's an early movement, electroculture is just starting to bud, we need to have some definition of terms. We're going to go deep now into the 3 primary points, but let us start with what they are in simple terms. This is where maybe you need to take notes. If you're washing dishes or going for a walk, take a moment of pause and listen closely. Have you been trying to learn electroculture? Well, good luck, honestly. It's either locked behind a $1,000 paywall or spun by online influencers with zero practical hands-on experience, no farm, no garden, no clue. And the rest? Old textbooks from the 1900s or dense academic papers that, let's be honest, no one actually reads. That's why I created the Electroculture Foundation series. I can't say it's no fluff and no woo. I like that from time to time, but I tend to ground it as best I can with science and real-world insights, straight talk, serious value for growers like you who actually want to learn. Subscribe now on your favorite listening app, search Electroculture Foundations, and stay tuned every Wednesday for new episodes. Let's go back to the show. Electrotropism. Have you heard that term before? The directional growth response of roots and shoots in the presence of external electric fields? Electrotropism? Have you ever heard of the term magnetotropism? The orientation and growth behavior of plants while under the influence of the Earth's magnetic field or any artificially generated magnetic fields? Magnetotropism? Now, before we give the third particular reason that electroculture works, let's define these terms a little further. Tropism in this context implies that plants are responding to those forces. They are aligning and growing and being influenced therein. Plants photosynthesize. You've probably heard that term before. That is an act of phototropism. So, electricity and magnetism have merit, just as photons of light have merit. They're influencing plants all the time. But there's another point that science is just starting to scratch the surface of this one. And I will say, if you want to check out the show notes, we always put citations. If you want to have some extra science, some validity to what I'm saying, you can check that out. Structured water. Okay, now here's the thing. Many people have heard the term structured water. Maybe you've heard the term magnetized water. Maybe you've even heard the term hexagonal water. Maybe you've heard it in the context of expensive machines that are supposed to alkalize your water, improve your hydration, mitigate risks to diseases like cancer, etc., etc. And maybe you've wondered that, that's a bit dubious. Here's the thing. Structured water is truly a thing. It exists. It's now being well documented. It's referred to as the fourth phase of water. And we're going to cover that. That's going to be the last point. So I really want you to stick around for that because that gets really profound. It underpins a lot of why electric and magnetic forces particularly within the soil matrix that contains dissolved water, electrolytes, is allowed to function the way it does on plants and microorganisms. So structured water, the biological optimization of water at the cellular level when exposed to electromagnetic energy, enhancing nutrient transport and cellular function, among other things. All right, let's dive right into these points. So together, these mechanisms, they offer a tangible scientific framework for understanding why electroculture isn't a fantasy. It's an awakening to forces that have quietly shaped life on this planet for eons of time. Are you ready for that? All right, here we are. Electrotropism, how plants detect and grow along electric fields. Plants are not just passive absorbers of light and water. They are natural bioelectric antennas. We're going to break that down a little bit later in more detail in upcoming segments of the Electroculture Foundation series, but let's understand it in simple terms now so we can fully grasp the science behind electrotropism. Plant cells, particularly in root tips and shoot, have the innate ability to sense external electric fields and respond to them. Imagine plants as they grow that they're wavering, they're vibrating, they're oscillating from side to side. Maybe you've seen a slow lapse growth imagery of a plant. If you haven't, have a look on YouTube, slow lapse growth of plants, frame by frame, and you can start to see the spiraling oscillation that plants undergo as they grow. Root tips are fundamentally doing the same thing. From the tip of the root or the tip of the shoot, they are oscillating in the presence of light, electricity, and magnetism. And this is fundamentally the definition of electrotropism in plants. It's electrotropism in action, visually apparent, something that you can see. It's also phototropism often, because light and photons is just as important, if not more so, for the needs of plants. However, there are some asides, curious, that we'll cover in future segments, how plants grown in complete darkness, when exposed to electricity and magnetism at certain frequencies, are still able to develop their morphology and grow, even without active photosynthesis. That is bizarre, but that is truth. We'll cover that later. So both roots and shoots, they exhibit this behavior, but in complementary ways. The roots, they tend to grow toward regions of negative electric potential, which often correspond to zones rich in moisture, minerals, and microbial activity. This is what makes living soil so profound. Besides the nutrients dissolved therein and the living microbial net, when you have greater electrical charge potential, a greater redox potential, therefore a greater amount of electrons within that medium, the plants will respond in kind. Suddenly the microbial activity present becomes greater. It's a biostimulant. The minerals dissolved are able to be uptaken more effectively by the root hairs of the plants and metabolized into their tissues. This is not just a microbial mechanism at play, a symbiotic one, it's also an electric one, based on ion pumps and exchange of differentials. Don't get lost in the weeds here, okay? But let's continue. Shoots and leaves, they tend to orient based on gradients of positive charge in the atmosphere, adjusting their angle and growth speed accordingly. So where roots are actively seeking negative charge, the aerial portion of plants are seeking positive differential. And it just so happens that under most circumstances, the atmosphere is a net positive charged Then the atmosphere contains a net positive charge, whereas the soil matrix contains a net negative charge. Think electrons in the soil and protons in the atmosphere. Now, this isn't just theoretical. Controlled experiments consistently show that when plants are exposed to even weak artificial electric fields, they will reorient their growth toward or away from the poles of that field based on its polarity and strength. Interesting. So that's where the oscillation, the rhythms of energy, helps to create the structure and the spiraling effects that plants undergo as they're growing. That spiraling effect. It's fundamentally an electric and magnetic phenomena. So what this means is profound. Earth's natural shifting atmospheric charges, geomagnetic fluctuations, and even the subtle fields generated by our electroculture tools can literally guide plant architecture, morphology, shape, without chemicals, without mechanical force. Plants are already tuned to navigate these invisible pathways. Electrotropism isn't fringe science, it's a repeatable, measurable biological response that reveals just how deeply plants are wired into the electrical life of the soil and sky. All right, I hope you're able to follow all of this. We're going to break it down in more detail in future segments, and we'll give examples with trees, mycorrhizal fungi within the soil, the electrical exchange of information within ecosystems, interspecies, how trees are working like atmospheric collectors and antennas and pumping their sap and nutrients in response to electrical gradients. This is fundamentally at the heart of electrophysiology, and we'll cover that, and that helps to understand how we can better design electroculture-based devices moving forward, and how we can better utilize them more effectively to stimulate growth in our plants. So magnetotropism, how plants align with the Earth's magnetic signature, this is also very fascinating. So with electrotropism, the Earth has this field of the ionosphere, the outer atmosphere, which is extremely positively charged, full of ions, particularly cations, these positively charged ions in the atmosphere. The Earth's magnetic field, its magnetosphere, which is external to the ionosphere, it covers our Earth, it protects our Earth from cosmic forces that are raining down upon us at all times. The magnetosphere itself, as we mentioned in earlier segments, is generating the Schumann resonance, ultra low frequency radio waves, the Earth's heartbeat. We'll cover that in later chapters as we go over concepts like the round towers of Ireland, the work of Phil Callahan, insect navigation, and how they use their antennas to determine which plants to eat and which ones not. We'll use that information also to help decipher the work of Georges Lakhovsky, as well as Slim Sperling, and this underpins the efficacy of coils, Moody coils, Lakhovsky coils, and tensor rings. But it's a whole other rabbit hole unto itself. We need these foundations first. We need to understand magnetotropism. We have to understand what mechanisms are influencing plants in an unseen way, so we can better frame these technologies and these pioneers. Otherwise, it's not going to make a lot of sense. So you need to follow along right from the beginning. Magnetotropism, how plants align with Earth's magnetic signature. Parallel to their sensitivity to electric fields, plants are also responsive to magnetic fields. This is called magnetotropism. I think it would have been better if I wrote perpendicular to their sensitivity to electric fields. But that's something, if you don't understand Maxwell's equations, it's an inside joke. Let's continue. Sorry, a little bit nerdy there. Both roots and shoots show this magnetic sensitivity. Roots adjust their depth, they branch and even angle their growth depending on the alignment and intensity of local magnetic fields. Interesting, because the Earth is not just enveloped in a magnetic field. The torus field, that magnetic field of the Earth generates, is entering into the pole, the geographical South Pole, moving up towards the geographical North Pole. So these magnetic fields are moving within the subsoil, within the geology of the Earth, the bones of the Earth, the connective tissue of the Earth, and generating localized fluctuations in magnetic phenomena. So this is changing a given area's magnetic field strength. And that gets really interesting, because this is fundamentally how Earth's magnetic fields, its geology, and the magnetic fields that are being influenced by the Earth's geology is underpinning the evolution of entire ecosystems, particularly plants. But that's for later, maybe even another book, because that's not really foundational to electroculture. But just so you know, there is a lot of depth to magnetotropism. But let me not get caught in the weeds, as I tend to do. We'll continue with the shoots. The shoots can exhibit altered orientation and growth rates, and even shift its flower buds, the nodules in which flowers emerge from, and the sequence of timing in which that occurs based on changes in the Earth's or the localized magnetic field strength in a given area, a given biome or region. Also, the forces that are interacting with the Earth's magnetic field, fundamentally the sun, is changing these rhythms. It's very deep stuff. I want to keep focused here on just magnetotropism as a definition of terms, but I tend to go on these asides so you can see that there's a lot here. It's not just the surface level material that I'm providing right now. This sensitivity, so magnetotropism, it isn't subtle. In studies where the ambient magnetic field is artificially weakened, distorted, or enhanced, plants often display significant developmental changes. So changes in their morphology, changes in the way their cells divide, their architecture, their design. So in simple terms, localized changes in magnetic field strengths are changing the shape and orientation of plants. If you've ever had a plant placed at the corner of a stone building, you'll notice that it will jut almost at a 90-degree angle. If it started young, as a young whip, 1 to 2 years, it's going to start to quickly move away from that sharp angle. In Feng Shui, that's referred to as daggers. And I think it's interesting here because this is, in this case at least, there are also subtle energy phenomena that go beyond electromagnetism. But in the context I'm speaking here, this is actually an interference pattern of the localized magnetic field in that given area because of the structure of the building. And nature doesn't work in right angles. Okay, you'll never see right angles in nature. So it creates an interference pattern, a magnetic pattern that is disharmonious. Living things do not like straight lines. They do not like right angles. I worked once for many years as a tree planter in the boreal forest of Canada, the West Coast, and I worked on some tree plantations that were designed in straight lines. Often it was a simple way to get trees in the ground very quickly for the purpose of harvesting timber 30, 40, 50 years out. And what I've observed in those type of plantations is that there's not a lot of living ecological diversity. There's not a lot of animals. There's a bit of chaos. It's fragmented. It's unnatural at best. And it can be felt. It feels disharmonious. It feels very uncomfortable compared to the organized chaos of a living forest that is in its own succession, that doesn't have straight lines or strange angles. Now, I recently came across some articles that were demonstrating in Canada that grizzly bears and black bears were beginning to rip out tree plantations that were designed in this disharmonious manner. It's as if they finally realized that their environment is just being messed with. And it literally would drive many animals insane because their brains, the neurological pathways that all living organisms develop through their environment and how they interact with their environment, when it's done in straight lines, it starts to create very cemented neural pathways in the brain. And I actually think this is fundamentally why the modern built environment is causing a lot of disease and mental illness, but that's a whole other tangent. Let's go back to magnetotropism. I spoke there about right angles of the house, and particularly that are made of metal siding or stone. It creates a greater interference pattern, and you can observe that. So in repetition here, this sensitivity, it's not a subtle one. It's not subtle at all. One of the key players in this response is a class of proteins called cryptochromes. These are light-sensitive proteins, which is really interesting. Here, if you really like spirals and the interconnection of all things through sacred geometry, individual amino acids, which make up protein molecules, they all spin. They're in constant rotation, spiraling pattern, in the presence of photons of light. So if you shine a light at an amino acid, it will spin either clockwise or counterclockwise. And when I studied nutrition, human nutrition, I was pretty quick to realize that there's a strange pattern here. Most amino acids, when exposed to light, begin to spin counterclockwise. They're referred to as left-hand rotations. Now, here's the curious thing. Some amino acids, they spin clockwise, so they're called right-handed. But the left-handed amino acids that universally spin, at least when I studied this, it may have changed a lot since then, but my understanding is that they spin counterclockwise in the presence of light. And protein molecules, which are the fundamental building blocks of complex tissues in our bodies, such as our muscle fibers, our nerve tissues, our eyes, as an example, and our nervous system as a whole, are all built on protein. And all protein molecules are built from left-handed amino acids that spin counterclockwise. Universally, there are no protein molecules that are built on right-handed amino acids that spin clockwise in the presence of light. Now, this is a strange, very strange observation because it's a bit beyond the scope of what we're doing here in this segment, but just to let you know that individual amino acids and complex protein molecules, the building block of biological life, they're all being influenced by light. They're all being influenced by electricity and magnetism. They're completely interdependent on these forces. We are fundamentally beings of light, beings of energy, magnetism. And plants are very much the same thing. And I do start to wonder, and it's just a curious thought, if individual protein molecules spin and they turn their structure into function in the presence of movement, and that is underpinned in part by light, by magnetism, and electricity, then isn't it strange that our eyes are made of nerve cells which are primarily protein-based? That at the focalized center of our eyes, our iris, we're bringing in light, we're channeling that and transmitting that into our nervous system in the form of electricity all the time. We think of it in such simple terms that it allows us to see, but what it actually fundamentally means is we're bringing in to ourselves through the tips of our eyes our entire environment, and we're internalizing that. And that is amazing. But that's an aside. Let's get back on point here. So in simple terms, plants are not only growing toward sunlight, they are simultaneously mapping and aligning themselves to the Earth's magnetic pulse. So think of our eyes taking in light, energy, the focalized tips of root hairs from plants, and the focalized tips of the shoot that is emerging upwards is in part like the focalized tip of our eyes, bringing in information. And that is amazing. It is incredible, miraculous even. It makes me really fundamentally think about the whole universe as being one big living system that is full of wonder. So by working with magnetic fields through your electroculture devices, whether that's through the strategic use of paramagnetic stones or the appropriate placement of ferrite magnets, we can enhance the natural navigation that plants are already using to grow. That is magnetotropism, electrotropism. Let's move on to the last point here, structured water. Now, usually this is the point in the foundation series where I put a paywall up. I say, hey, look, listen, it takes a lot of time to record, to produce, to upload all of this content. Give me some money. $5 a month. Support this development. But I really think that structured water is so foundational to everybody in this movement that even if you're not ready or able to support the foundation series, I'm going to make this freely available because everybody needs to know about it, especially when you're working with electroculture. And honestly, we need the community within Electroculture, Beginners to Advanced on Facebook. We need people like you to become pioneers, to become teachers, to become advocates, and to fill in information where necessary to help sway the naysayers so that we can make this movement more mainstream. It's not going to happen overnight, but we do need these foundations for that to occur. That's my little offering for you if you're not a paid member. For those of you who are, I want to thank you because we do have some early registrants that have put in a year subscription. And you know who you are. I'm totally grateful. You're going to be getting extra content very soon. I'll make sure it's worth your while. Have you actually installed an Electroculture antenna yet? If so, maybe you've seen it yourself. A plant on the verge of death suddenly bounce back to life like magic? But here's the thing, not all antennas are created equal. Some designs just flat out work better. Not that long ago, something happened in our Facebook group that caught my attention. Suddenly, we were vetting over 1,000 new members a day. Naturally, I had to find out what caused the surge. Turns out, a post featuring the Tesla 369 antenna by Electrified Garden. That became the most shared, most viewed post in the entire history of our community. Almost 700,000 people saw it. Wild, right? And here's the kicker. This simple design, handcrafted in Latvia, broke the Facebook algorithm so fast, it literally got knocked down. Why? Who knows? But what I do know is these aren't cheap mass-produced knockoffs from Temu or Alibaba. These are made with 99.9% pure copper with over 1,000 sales and tons of 5-star reviews. If you want to see the design that lit up our community, visit electrifiedgarden.com/fundamentals. Full transparency, it's an affiliate link which helps support this podcast. You'll find the link in the show notes. Thanks for your support. Now let's get back to the show. Inside every plant cell, around every root hair, and between the fine particles of living soil, water behaves differently than the simple liquid we learned about in textbooks. In fact, water, under natural environmental conditions, enters a more organized, energetic state that plays a vital role in supporting life. Pioneering research by a very interesting man, Dr. Gerald Pollack. I believe he's a professor outside of Seattle. Don't quote me on that. I read part of his book, The Fourth Phase of Water, many moons ago. He demonstrated that when water is exposed to specific natural forces, light, heat, so heat in the context infrared waves, electrical fields, and magnetic influences, that water will undergo a structural transformation into what he termed exclusion zone water, or EZ water for short. This is the fourth phase of water. When you think of water, you often think either in terms of water as a liquid, a gas, or as a solid, ice. But there is indeed a fourth phase, and this is what Pollack has brought forth into the scientific community, and it's now starting to enter, hopefully, horticultural practitioners and farmers and gardeners alike, but it's starting to enter more into the alternative health movement with the use of infrared light therapy, low light therapy. But easy water is characterized by these three critical properties. It has increased molecular order or structuring. So this is where the water molecules are starting to organize themselves into tightly packed hexagons, hexagonal layers, a lattice. Think the shape of the honeycomb in a beehive, where each of the junctions are atoms within the structure of the water molecules themselves. And it changes the ability of the water when they start to organize in that way. It changes their properties. So they become more viscous. So the structured water then starts to behave more like a gel than a simple liquid. You can imagine it's creating a stable matrix within and around cells. So our cells are bathed, the interstitial fluid is bathed in structured water. Our DNA is bathed in structured water. And the reason for that, one of the reasons, is because, and this is the third point, that structured water has greater electrical conductivity. So this brings it all back to magnetotropism and electrotropism. They're all interconnected because when water is exposed to magnetic fields and exposed to electric fields, at least certain magnetic and electric fields, it changes its structure. And therefore, it's able to be more conductive. It transmits more electrons, energy. So this is allowing for more efficiency in living organisms and also in the earth, because the earth's yin water, or the water that's below the surface, that's moving through the earth itself, is structured, that it is allowing for a more electrical charge, or telluric currents can be transmitted through underground aquifers. Very interesting stuff, implying that the earth is actually alive with electricity and magnetism. We'll break that down more in future segments, a living earth and why that matters for electroculture. But in the context of plant health and soil vitality, these changes are truly transformative. When your growing environment is enriched with sources of subtle energy, such as sunlight, mineralized soils, passive electric currents from antennas or magnetic stones, the water in your plants and the root zones that they're in doesn't merely hydrate them. That structuring allows for more energy exchange in terms of electrons, as well as the transmission of nutrients. And also intercellular communications or interspecies communication, which we'll cover a few segments from now as we speak about mycorrhizal fungi and its connection to electroculture. So structured water directly benefits your plants in several key and important ways. It makes nutrients more available, so minerals dissolve more efficiently in structured water, making them easier for the roots of plants to absorb. The roots become more conductive, so the water pathways into the root cells themselves. To the roots cells themselves, that's an interesting phrase, faces less resistance, improving the hydration of plants and their nutrient uptake. And of course, microbial symbiosis, because plant vitality is underpinned by beneficial soil microbes, and they thrive in energized electropositive zones that structured water creates, leading to healthier, more resilient soil ecosystems. So when you apply electroculture techniques, be it through copper spirals, atmospheric antennas, paramagnetic stone placement, or even simple grounding techniques, i.e. not growing your plants in plastic vases, you're not just boosting your plant growth superficially, you're facilitating the creation of microenvironments where water becomes a charged, life-enhancing medium. This isn't mysticism or wishful thinking, it's biophysics. It's voltage, magnetism, light, and structure working in harmony to optimize the medium through which life expresses itself. Water. Isn't that beautiful? When you structure the water, you structure the vitality of living things. So now you have a better understanding of some of the hidden mechanisms behind electroculture. This is truly foundational stuff. Electrotropism, magnetotropism, and the phenomenon of structured water, 3 scientific gateways that reveal how deeply plants are attuned to the Earth's subtle energetic forces. These aren't abstract ideas, they form the living framework through which plants grow, orient, nourish, and evolve. Plants are not passive objects in their environment, they are dynamic, living antennas decoding and harmonizing with the electrical and magnetic song of the Earth. And when we engage with electroculture, we aren't imposing something new onto nature, we are tuning in to a system that has been operating quietly, beautifully, since time immemorial. In the next segments of the Electroculture Foundation series, we'll build upon these essential truths. We'll explore how roots and shoots operate as natural anodes and cathodes, and yes, those terms will make sense, generating electrical gradients that drive growth. How electric currents act as hidden language of biological communication. Whoa. How trees function as electromagnetic collectors, weaving sky and earth. Oh, that's going to be fun. And how the underground fungal networks, nature's original internet, transmit energy and information through living soils. To get access to that and to unlock the full Electroculture Foundation series, head over to electroculture.com/s/foundations. It's less than $5 a month. Full-length episodes every Wednesday, and of course, the untold stories, the rebels, the researchers, the mystics, and the forgotten science. Become an early pioneer of a growing movement. And if you're already an Electroculture Foundation insider, next week we're starting all of our paid extensions. And for everyone else, we'll catch you for our free edition next Wednesday. See you then.